And like today, I'll be around.
All right. Well, we are starting up our tomorrow talk. I'm just going to adjust a few things because I changed what we were doing kind of last minute here. So, 1 second. Actually, while I do that, Cersei, did you want to kind of recap on what we discussed last Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, last Saturday we had a discussion. We were talking about things we didn't like in MMORPGs. That took up pretty much most of our discussion, was figuring out, okay, we talked about what we liked the previous weekend. Now, what do we not like, or what do we not want in a game? I think our number one, pretty much across the board, was we don't want games that are going to limit, the ability for us to play with our friends. Like, okay, we have 6 friends and we only have a 4-player, co-op availability or 2-player. Like, that just doesn't work for us. So, yeah, that was pretty much the majority of our conversation. I think that was the biggest sticking point. There were some others as well. We don't like games that have pay to win. We don't like games that maybe don't have great customization. Those were just some of the topics that came up as we were discussing what we like or what we don't like in games in general.
Awesome. And Yeller is joining us this weekend, so we don't have Rose or Liz with us. Liz usually would be kind of in the chat, keeping up with us. So we'll make this portion of it kind of brief because we're just going to go into talking about our Daggerheart session last Sunday. And then we're going to kind of present an idea moving forward for the group. That said, before I jump into taking one game from Cersei, Tony, and myself, I'm actually going to ask Geller a question to kind of like blend both of the pros and cons of what we want in our games into like probably a single question here. So Geller, you joined us and you got to know many of us through Ashes of Creation, or at least through the community building process of waiting for Ashes of Creation to launch. What drew you to Ashes of Creation, and what doesn't? What typically like dissuades you from playing an MMO?
So, um, I'll just say what drew me to Ashes originally was this promise of bringing back what makes those kind of games challenging, interesting, fun. I feel like a lot of games in general, not just MMOs, but MMOs particularly, have gone down the road of having like way too much microtransactions, mechanics built into the game to facilitate sort of keeping you on the game without actually giving you a reason to get on the game, um, and just not having good things in place to sort of create that situation, much like on a TTRPG, like how they would create situations that would allow for that social aspect to sort of blossom in a way that um, creates those memories and that sense of community. And when you're on the forefront of like an MMO or a community game, it's just a feeling like any other, and I just really wanted to get that back. The last time I had that was in, weirdly enough, Destiny, when it first came out. I was, out doing the Vault of Glass when it first released, and the end of Crota or whatever it was called, the Dark Below, and I don't know, I guess I'm just latching on to memories of when I used to play WoW, Wrath of the Lich King, and just had a good time.
I'm actually kind of glad you brought up WoW, because a lot of us talked about WoW a little bit too over the last couple weekends. What kind of like got you away from WoW?
I think just time for the most part. I got more interested in other things in life around my high school years. Um, I, of course, got more interested in relationships, and so that became a whole thing. That's a whole nother story, whole can of worms I don't want to open up. But I originally would on WoW like go into dungeons. I particularly liked the dungeon aspect of WoW, and joining and queuing up with a group of people to complete those dungeons. And I think that's what brought me to Destiny as well. But uh, what sent me away from WoW is, I guess, yeah, just interest in other things, to be honest. And I didn't really have like a group of friends that anchored me to that game, so it was just time to move on.
So let me kind of ask you a question. Let me know if I'm wrong in this assumption too. But it sounds to me like you like games that have a challenge to it, that have kind of an end point to content until a patch releases. Like you don't like maybe necessarily like the reputation grinds. And it sounds like you like the features that allow you to kind of jump in with your friends and then jump out kind of relatively, not very long sessions, but long enough for you to relax and connect and get involved in the world. Is that pretty much what I'm hearing?
Pretty much like immersing myself into what's going on in the game. Um, a thing I have a hard time doing nowadays is just committing myself to an MMO because I love the idea of escaping reality into a game and just living in that world, and it's just an unrealistic goal, honestly, as an adult. And so um, it's kind of just like chasing that fleeting dream. Joss Strife Hayes made a really good video about after the Ashes of Creation drama, about how people latch on to MMO games because they're searching for that sense of community. And when games, you know, are made not trying to facilitate that or just like to scam you, then you never find it. But yeah, I mean, that'd be an accurate description about what I like about those kind of games.
Did you do a lot of, because if you saw our pro list, you would understand probably why we gravitate a little more towards MMOs rather than like necessarily some things that others would. But have you ever role played an MMO before?
So that's kind of how I ended up meeting you guys in some way. Because I used to play a little bit of Final Fantasy 14. And I think it was 14, yeah, the MMO. And uh, I originally wanted to try getting into like a guild that had sort of this where you could have an identity in the game. I was still chasing that idea of being immersed in it. I didn't really understand really what I was looking for, so that was one way I was trying to explore that. And I got into RPing with this guild. Shoot, what are they called? Eternus.
Yeah, Turnus.
Yeah, yeah. So I joined Eternus, and I had like one night of RP with them, and I guess I just didn't go back into it. And I kind of just sat in the Discord for a long time, and then I heard about Ashes, um, and so I joined. I joined the Discord that Eternus had made for Ashes, and then I guess at some point they kind of just broke off from each other, So we just ended up being our own thing, and that's how I met all of you guys.
What game was Eternus for?
We,
Final
we
Fantasy.
were playing. There was Eternus is it's a little RP group. It's the one that Zason and Toxa came from. That was also the guild that it used to be called Kingdom of Arcia. And it was also a game that we played Archage in. Yeah.
Oh, Esley, I kind of wish you ran into me and Tony in 14. We would have gotten you into some really good people.
Oh,
Perhaps,
yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah, we role played for like 10 years in 14.
I don't know what it was about that too. I felt like I was coming into like a group of people I knew nothing about that all knew each other, and there was like this sense of camaraderie that I just felt disconnected from, and so I never really like connected with them.
Yeah, I understand that. That's why, like, when you join Guild Adventures, the whole idea about Guild Adventures was to make sure, like, when we got in game, which never bore fruition, unfortunately, was to kind of make it about the missions and involve players as much as you can and not make anyone feel like a prop. And I feel like when you join a guild that's established, you either get the, I don't want to say like good old boys club vibe, whether that's intentional or not, because I don't think half the time it's intentional. I think 90% of the time it's not intentional. I think they invite people because they really want to grow, but people stick with who they're comfortable with. But or you get the groups where it's like so rigid and structured that it's like either you like that or you don't. But yeah, no, I get it. Roleplay is what keeps, I think, at least me, Sersei, and Tony really engaged with MMOs. Sersei played Archage for a long time, most likely because of the roleplay.
Yep.
I got my start in RPing at all, playing second edition Dungeons and Dragons back in like 2018. A friend of mine, I guess my girlfriend at the time had a group of friends that they second edition was their thing. They were older, so they were like two parents, and she was friends with their son. And I had been new to RP at the time. And so up to that point, I had like made original characters, but they were really like two-dimensional and really weren't nuanced as characters I would make now. But I really like the aspect of TTRPGs because of the freedom you have, but mainly also, and this ties into sort of MMOs as well, is like I love having that game aspect, that challenge, that having mechanics that you can manipulate, move around, and find the best ways to use them and stuff like that. In addition to having this nuanced story and characters together.
Yeah, my favorite moments in now actually, well, this will be for everyone. All of us can answer this too. My favorite moments in MMORPGs hasn't just literally just been you sit in a tavern role playing with other people. I like to go out in the world, adventure. I actually even like some of the guild structures where we've had pen and paper rule systems associated into our MMO, just because it's sometimes if the MMO can't support like Ashes could have had like open world PvP, so I feel like you might not have had to rely on pen and paper systems, but in like Final Fantasy or SOTOR where you really couldn't interact with another player in a aggressive manner, the pen and paper kind of like lets you do a lot of theater of mind, and it was light. I would call it pen and paper light. It wasn't like intense or anything, but it was enough to like resolve like combat situations and things like that. I really liked that because it helped with the narrative and it made sure that as players, we weren't always winning. Because when you have a huge group of players, sometimes if you don't have some sort of structure, like 40 players at an event, those events can go on for hours because no one wants to get the contested hit against them. Just things I've learned over the last decade and a half of RPing and MMOs. I just feel like you get those players that just don't want to take a hit. And it ruins the scene for everyone else. So when you have like a light dice system involved, it kind of keeps everyone generally honest. And even the best of us have really bad nights with rolls. So it kind of makes it fun and funny and memorable. That was kind of my experience with MMOs. Is usually the role play actually kept me involved and invested longer. Even if the game was fun to play, it's just kept me in it longer, more invested in my character. Yeah. But if Sersei and Tony want to add something, or you do, Geller, please feel free to jump in.
I just had the picture of us getting stuck in holes, getting our butts whacked.
Okay, context there's Tony.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry. In role play.
Oh my god. Context, Tony.
I'm trying to give context here. Okay. There was a scene where we were trying to go through this hole to get into a cave. And a couple of us rolled bad. We got stuck in the hole. And somebody thought he was going to be a wise butt. He used the broadside of his sword on one of us and then his foot on the other, getting us through the hole.
The bigger story was that we were trying to save somebody from a cave, and there was a slight collapse of the cave structure, and it created a hole that was probably big enough for a Lalafell to get comfortably through there. So most of the players were not Lalafell. So for them to try to get through there, they really had to like force themselves through there with some strength. And so they had to do strength checks to just kind of push through there. We didn't have like crazy modifiers or anything like that. It was a simple system, like I said, just created some randomness, but it was funny because, normally when you didn't have dice involved, people would just crawl through there, no issue. But because dice said, no, you fail, it created a humorous moment for a few of the characters trying to get through the hole. And it was fun. It was funny. It was laughable because it was like, yeah, that stuff would not just randomly happen. Most players would be like, no, I'm not going to have that happen to me. I'm not going to get stuck in the hole.
Or like the stampeding chocobo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Yeah, no, I think for us, Geller, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a game that we can play, but we can also potentially role play in. Because if you saw our con list, you'd see that most of us want a level of immersion with the game. We want in-depth lore, at least some of us do. Some of us want a good story from the world, but we also want to be able to get back to our grassroots. At least half of us do, kind of getting into the game and making characters and making stories again. Because that's what keeps us in MMOs, even if they weren't like the best MMOs. It's just the environment that we created made it great. And you know what? I think your statement earlier about the quote that gentleman said about MMOs with community, the longing of community, I think role players have the advantage there. Versus like other players who are just looking for content. If a game's bad and the content's terrible, but the world is great and the lore is great, it's the role players who are creating the content and the community in a lot of those situations. Like Tor has a huge role play community because of Jedi and stuff, but the content's not there. 14 actually, I think 14 is successful right now because it has a lot of content, but it also has a very large roleplay community on Balmung and Mateus. And if you find the right group, you can be really immersed into that environment. And I would say probably other communities and other games probably were similar. I'll let Sersei kind of talk about Arcage, but from Cersei's explanation, it sounds like Arcage had that pocket community where it was players creating it rather than necessarily the game. I think the game was just kind of like the platform.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, in Arcade, you had people making like player villages and stuff like that. So that added a level of immersion, and that's not something the game had. It's just what people were able to establish themselves. So, like in the guilds, Eternus I was in, we made a player village. People had their houses, their shops, and all that stuff. And then there were other villages. There was a village that was like a kind of an entertainment like place because they had a huge tavern that had weekly events and entertainers. Like the whole village was basically a village of entertainers. So, and they all supported, like it was a very community driven. So there's a lot of that and that kind of community involvement that really made the RP community at that time feel like it was alive because of the player base. So that was really fun.
Yeah, and I think there's a stigma about role players too. I feel like most people are like, oh, they just stand around doing nothing. But that can be true in some situations. I think one of the cons, because it's more recent MMO for me, was 14 had a lot of taverns, and I'm not a big tavern role player. I like to visit them in character. I like them to be stopping points, but I don't want that to be like 90% of my role play. I want to be out there in the world, and I want to engage the world. It's a huge canvas, and I want to explore it. And that was the same with SWG. I loved going to the cantinas, and there were systems designed for players to actually hang out in the cantinas because you'd listen to entertainers or watch them and get buffs. I'd go there maybe to meet like contacts and stuff, but I'd always use the world for roleplay, and that's how kind of Tony and I met, was through kind of like roleplay channels. It wasn't even like we would join the same group. It was just networking. And I feel like your comment is really hitting me harder today, because that's literally like why MMOs have been important, is not the necessarily like the content, even though that is important to me too. If you saw my con list, I'm kind of in between Sersei, Tony, and then Rose and Lies, but I'm definitely I like feeling invested, not just in the content but in my character. And I think that's why like modern MMOs struggle for me in some degrees, because they don't actually build out a robust lore so you can create something that feels connective. Like Ashes was starting to get there. I figured we could work a lot of it out, but in the end, if you really step back, it didn't really have a lot of lore. Like we had to hope that we were creating lore that was in line with Ashes. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but I always felt like we were teetering on the edge of what was real lore and then what was like lore we created that we believe would be relatable.
I think there was a decent amount for the game not being out at all. I think if we actually got to a point where the game was out, we'd have a lot more, but that never got to be the case.
No, unfortunately, no. And that's sad too, because I feel like we had some really good characters designed. Like Eslane was an awesome character. We always were like, is he going to bring chaos today? Or is he going to be like book Eslane? Or like Tony being like she was youthful, maybe a little naive, kind of like Nahele was a little naive too, because he was more book smart, and she was more like Wild's smart. So when she had to deal with like people in the political sense, she struggled, and Nahele was the opposite. He would have more struggles probably out in the wilds than he did in person with people. And then you had Cersei's character, who was, I would say she was probably a little naive too in certain arenas. I feel like she had political savvy, but I think she also was a very complex character too, because she was young, thrusted into leadership, and kind of learning as she goes. So I feel like we had created some really in-depth characters for Ashes. It's a shame we never got a chance to role play them in Ashes, because I feel like that would have kept it with Ashes for quite some time.
I think we just spent so much time outside of Ashes building up those characters that it possibly transcended like the limitations of the game in some ways. I think we connected our characters to a world that didn't exist.
Yeah, no, that's fair. 100% fair. That I think some characters would have had more trouble just leaving Sanctus to go to Vera than others. So I think they were kind of like almost role playing themselves into like a corner. Whether accidentally too, because I think that's just how narratives flowed. So I think some characters probably been like, well, that was fun, but now I'm gonna have to make a new character for Vera.
Yeah, I had originally, there was at one point I think where I had to like re-evaluate what my character's motivations entirely were because I misunderstood the lore about the gates. And apparently it was more of a myth thing rather than oh, the gates are open now. I want to be one of those guys.
I think that was just came down to like time, because we were saying that the gates weren't rediscovered yet. Like I think we could have certainly started our story closer to the gates being open, but we were like, oh, we can't really roleplay Vera, so we'll just say that we're before the gates were discovered or rediscovered or reopened. So I don't think you're necessarily like misguided. I just think it's because of the way our story was designed for our community. It was kind of like, no, we're kind of just before the gates open. Like we're building up just before, so that way when the gates do open, like a lot of us would either make the decision to go through the portals for the first time, and some of us might not. Obviously, I think Guild Adventures definitely would have jumped in because, I mean, that's our shtick. We would definitely would have went through.
I have a lot of neat ideas, but too late now.
Yeah. But that's that. I think the positive what we're discussing is what makes MMOs fun for a lot of people, is being able to create this character that's not like the hero of the story, kind of just like your average Joe out in the world, and immersing them in the lore and story around them.
Yeah, I think I came to the conclusion that I wanted something out of MMOs that I felt wasn't common. I don't think I'll find that again, to be honest. And I think what I was really looking for was that I wanted to sort of be a presence in a gaming community for an MMO and be known and have the identity of my character in that world. And rather than just being, like a role player, like you said, like standing around role playing, doing nothing, or just simply playing the game and not interacting socially.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I don't. There's very rare that one individual role player like stands out amongst a sea of role players. I think what tends to happen is you'll have a group of role players that stands out amongst groups of role players. So if you have like 70% of the people staying in taverns as guilds or in their houses, no matter what game it is, they're not going to probably be noted very well. But if you have guilds out there using like the world and stuff, those guilds will become known, and then in proxy, some of those members who are really big into the roleplay scene that visit some of these taverns or places and talk about the adventures that they're having with their guild, I feel like those are the role players that end up standing out. It's because they're part of a guild that's super active out in the world, and then they themselves as individuals are active in some of like these more isolated areas, and then the stories kind of spread from there. It's a long build up though. I've never seen it where someone instantly becomes like, you know what I mean? Like the star, but I feel like just like anything, there's a commitment that goes into it. And usually it starts from your group. I mean, you see guilds talked about all the time, right? And usually they're like, oh, that person from that guild. It's like, Oh, okay. So there's a negative connotation with the guild, and because this person's so prevalent in front of everyone, whether they're a role player or not, that person is known, and their association with that guild is also known. Like I feel like that's usually how it breaks down in
I feel like
MMOs.
we only ever hear about like streamers guilds.
Yeah, for the most part, but I feel like you had other people like in Ashes who weren't really, I wouldn't say they were big streamers. They were just very well known and very part of very mega sized guilds like Polar. I don't think Polar really streamed, did they?
I know what you're talking about.
It's a guild in Ashes that was during the testing phase. They were very large. There's very divisive opinions about them, and then certain members of their guild would be highlighted. They weren't really a streaming guild, but because their numbers were so large and they were everywhere, certain individuals in their community started to stand out. And because their guild had a very interesting opinion about them, it colored pretty much everybody in that guild in the same light. So they became notorious, I guess is the right word to use. It does happen. It can happen even outside of streamers. I just feel like streamers, big streamers, I feel like they have a broader audience, like Thor and stuff. I feel like Thor spent like a few moments in Ashes, considering, in comparison with others. And then you have other guilds that didn't have streamer presence, but they were large. But every player inside the game knew about them. Maybe not everyone outside the game. Like, I think that was a good example. You were like, who's Polar? But that's a great example. I feel like if you weren't invested in the game and in the game a lot, you probably didn't even notice big players, but everyone knew them. Everyone knew these people, and we're like, ugh. It can happen. We had a couple guildmates in Gilded House that I knew from another guild, and that guild we were part of followed that individual because they used their same tour name, and other people in the Ashes community recognized him. If I had probably used my same, they probably would have saw me too, but it's the same kind of motif. Like, if your guild gets big enough inside at least the community structure within the game, it doesn't matter if you're like a big streamer. It's just people outside the game won't know you. But that's just perspective. Yeah. Because trust me, you can have very interesting individuals in a community that can really make your community either shine or get a negative like shadow over their head. Well, hopefully one day, Geller, we'll find a home, and then maybe we'll try to be like, hey, Geller, we're role-playing, and this is what the world's like.
Maybe.
I mean, a lot of people, at least in, I will say 14 and SWG, what they would do is they would just log in. They would go to events, or if they had planned an RP with somebody, or they just wanted random encounters, they would just log in for as long as they can and then log off. That's usually what MMOs are for some people, is like they're just a community, or if they wanted to log in and not role play that day, they would just do content for like a couple hours and then log off. Like, I think that's probably the standard. I would say that's a standard role player. I would say like the standard role player is the one that wanted to just pretty much go to role play events, do RP, and then occasionally do content when the mood strikes them.
It's pretty consistent with mostly how Gilded House was for me. I was more of a presence in like events rather than individual threads.
Yeah, you attended a lot of our pen and paper tabletops, and that's how you and Thalia got your characters connected.
Yeah. I was invested in that story.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. It was unexpected, so it was an unexpected uh relationship that was building between them. So that was really interesting. I did not expect that. I expected her to die very shortly after making her.
I noticed you were trying to kill her so bad that one event, and I was like, nope, nope, you're living. Sorry.
Yep, and that changed her whole trajectory because she had a she had a very interesting background too. So yeah, there's things like that, like with because I mean, Eslane and I were role playing with that stuff like up until the guild fell apart. So it's kind of like one of those things like, well, shit.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's yeah, like there was lots of fun times, even though that that guild is no more. It was still fun role plays we had for sure, and it's always fun when you're Eslane's being like, "Oh, I got this room for you. It's the closet." And I had basically here it's the closet, and also I'm the only one who has the key. It's kind of how.
No big deal.
Oh my god.
I don't even know if my character learned about the closet. It's been so long, I don't even remember.
I don't think he even knew yet, but Eslane was like, "Oh, nice, you've got this bodyguard. Where'd you keeping the bodyguard?" And he'd be like, "Oh, she's in here." Oh my god.
I can't remember if it was either because I didn't think there were rooms, or if it was
I
because the
think that
rooms
was
were
it.
far away.
I think it was because you were thinking there weren't rooms. That's why.
Oh, that's right. Didn't join our Conan server because we created the whole like Guild Adventures area. We created the Pirate area. We created Gilded House. Like we were visually like constructing these places. We did a pretty good job too, I would say. I think Gilded House was the biggest project.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was good times, and those pen and paper sessions that we did is kind of what the MMO should have been like, would have been like ultimately, because yes, we didn't have the same like visual aspects we would have had in Ashes, but everything that we were doing could have easily applied in game too. So, the simple dice that we used, all of it, super easy. Obviously, Ashes had a means for you to necessarily not have to use dice because they did have a robust PvP system in place, or at least they were going to. And then later on, towards the end, they added dueling. So I feel like we might have gotten away with not doing dice, maybe very minorly for like searching for silly things or whatnot, but it wouldn't have been like the cornerstone of RP. Which would have been nice, because usually in a lot of MMOs you have to have some sort of supporting system. Otherwise, I hate running events when there's no dice, at least at a minimal degree, because I do not want to be stuck hosting an event for 8 hours because these two people just don't want to give up. And it's like, oh my god. One of you take a hit. This is unreasonable at this point.
I felt like one of our combats died out in one of our threads because I was like being kind of like that, but maybe that was just my own head that I had with oh boy, I don't remember her name.
Thyra?
Yeah, Thyra.
She really likes that. I know. So Thyra and we met in 14, so she was very used to using like dice systems and stuff in our MMOs. We role played for like a year together in game. So
Shall we move on?
yeah, we shall move on. Perfect. So I guess what I'll ask here, and Eslane, if you want to add something, you can, but Sersei and Tony, I'll ask Rose, Raps, and Lies off stream, but is there a game that you'd like the group to try?
I'll let Tony go first.
Oh, thanks. I'm gonna go to one that I know. I'm sorry, Cersei, that you don't like, But for me, I'm gonna go with Final Fantasy 14, mostly because it's the one MMO that I know that I am comfortable with. I have a longer learning curve than a lot of people with the different MMOs or in different games. So, but at least in this one, I'm familiar with enough things that I can work with other people and help them and not always be carried. Notice I say always, but I can be more productive than in a lot of other places. And the role play, if you get the right group of people, the role play we usually do, the adventuring role plays and so forth, are outstanding. And other than SWG, um, I found that being able to role play in the world in Final Fantasy was fairly easy, and using some of their platforms, like they at one point the dungeons became that you could go into the dungeons and actually role play within them, and that was fun. So that was as it develops more, maybe they'll do more of that kind of thing. I don't know.
All right. And Cersei, what's your game that you'd like everyone to try?
I think it'd be fun to try. I know it's been like years now. I think the last time we tried, but I think it'd be fun to try potentially like Elder Scrolls Online. I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit off stream, but I think it's not a difficult game. I mean, it has lots of soloability, but it also has opportunities for group play. And I know they've had a lot of class reworks, and they were going to continue that, I think, this summer and through on. So I think that would be an experience that'd be nice to give it an opportunity. There just isn't a lot of new like MMORPG games, so I feel like that's a good middle ground. And while it's about 10 years or so old now, it doesn't feel like it kind of similar to Final Fantasy. It has an aesthetic that it doesn't feel like it's aged like a lot compared to some other games like Arcade looks old now. And also like even Ashes like had an aesthetic that it was going to age badly. Like it didn't have an art style that I think would have been durable over time, like some of the other games like Final Fantasy or Elder Scrolls.
That's very fair. I'm not sure what I would choose right now, but if I had to choose one, I think it's going to be a game that's not quite out yet. And it's a little bit reversed. It has potential of having a lot of content to it and a lot of diversity, but the graphics are probably not going to be a fan favorite. If people can get past maybe the graphic aspects of the game, I think it'll be really fun. And it's called Monsters in Memory. That's what I'm going to probably put down here. But yeah,
What do you like about that?
Well, that one is actually going to have a robust traditional class system, but very robust. It's going to have like druids. They're actually coming up with like different concepts for like druidic artwork, so you could transform into like bears and stuff. They're going to have wizards, obviously, and priests and clerics and all the works. They're going to have a bunch of classes, but they also have unique races. And I like the fact that their races are going to have their own unique cultures and identity, and the world is going to be pretty big. They actually have their entire music playlist on YouTube, and it's just remarkable. The music is like, I would say Square's edX level music. It's really good. Music really can define a scene for me sometimes. Because there's areas even in Final Fantasy XI that would otherwise not have the magical feel they had if it weren't for the music. So I feel like music is pretty important. I think typically overlooked by a lot of people because it's like this background thing. But man, if that music score can rock, it just changes the environment. It's hard to explain what I mean by that, but I'm sure we've all had those moments where we enter a zone in an MMO and we're like, oh yeah, the scene hits, but that music with the scene makes it really like something special. There's a lot to Monsters in Memory. Like I said, the one downturn of it is going to be the graphics, but I think they're going with a more old school graphics vibe so they can focus heavily on content and world building, and I think that gives it the potential to be a fun game. Because I think when we looked at Ashes, it was going to Unreal Engine 5. It was going to be this robust world. It was, we all know how much it was supposed to offer. So I feel like I'm a little more hesitant on jumping into a new game when they're using Unreal Engine, because Ashes wanted to stay at the forefront of the graphics curve, so they kept changing their Unreal Engine. Every time it updated, they would change their engine to the newest update, which then made a lot of their previous work kind of outdated. So that's why the graphics always felt like the way they did, because they never just locked in a version of Unreal Engine 5, polished it, cleaned it up, and then focused on content. If they had done that from the beginning and then later on decided to update the engine once they had a really big, robust fan base, kind of like WoW in 14, they updated their graphics engine after years, decade maybe. They finally upgraded they just focused on making the engine they have as beautiful as they could, and then they focused on content. I feel like Ashes was one of those games that just never did that, so I'm kind of more hesitant on the Unreal Engine 5 MMOs right now, because I just don't want those developers to get stuck in like, we have to be on the current version of it. Otherwise, I would potentially have put Scars, I forgot the whole name of it, Scars of Honor up there, but I'm hesitant with that because of Unreal Engine plus mobile. So it's like, the mobile content. But yeah, so that's why I put it up there. My long-winded rant. And like I said, I will add Roses, Wraps, and Liza's up here. So I'm actually going to remove the reserved. We'll put Lies there. And then, Esleen, did you want to add anything?
I was looking up to see if that SAO Echoes of Aincrad game was an MMO, but apparently it's not. It's an action RPG. So no, I don't really have a suggestion. Maybe just maybe try some more TTRPGs at some point.
Well, our Sundays will always be locked in for tabletops for sure, 100%. And maybe in the future, I don't even necessarily have to be the game master either. So,
But you do such a good job.
That's just, he's basically saying, hey, Geller. Hey, Esling. I don't have to make the rules. Oh my gosh.
What?
we got experience.
Nothing.
That's all I was trying to say. We had experience at our tables. So. Perfect. So I'll just put you down for TTRPGs. I feel like that still falls into maybe not massive multiplayer online, but hey, it's still cooperative roleplay experience with potential for PvP. And we're making the world. Yeah, we'll get Liza's, Rose, and Raps's off stream here, so that'll be good. At least we'll have, and then we can plan a schedule on how we want to handle that. so probably not next weekend, but maybe we'll start brainstorming during the week on like, yeah, we'll brainstorm a little bit on that one. But very cool. And then I figured we'll just go right into the Daggerheart stuff now. And since I've monopolized the hosting duties, I'll let Sersei actually start us off there with getting us into the Daggerheart world.
Oh, great. You put it all on me. Just like in the Daggerheart. Of course. Okay. Well, Daggerheart. Our last session, we had quite a whirlwind. We had left off, and I can speak for my character, Thistle. Thistle was at the Applebrook estate where she had found Bremia and Geller. Unexpectedly, that she found out that Bremia was an Applebrook, and that was a whole thing in itself. And after they had their little back and forth, Thistle left the Applebrook house, and Geller and Bremia had their little talk as well. And then Geller was like, "Well, I guess I'm gonna take a walk." I'll let you describe how that session and everything that came to it. How Geller, what was going through Geller's head this whole time? He left the Applebrook house, and then he sees Thistle talking to this sister of the Red. What's Geller thinking?
So initially, Geller saw that Bermia was really anxious about having me there, and so the main thing was just perhaps me being out of this situation will make her feel a little better. And also, after discussing with her some of the options, I figured probably the best course scenario is just that I leave the house for now until we know for sure whether her aunt is going to snitch on us. And so going through his head, he was just going to perhaps take a look around the village. He's always sort of in problem solving mode, and just trying to think about what they got to do next, where they're gonna go, which is kind of up in the air right now for all of us. So he's just kind of resting, trying to find some peace and rest for the time being. And the fact learning that the Crimson Sisters are there isn't helping. So it's probably better for him to just be on the move. And that's what's going through his head. When he sees Thistle and the Crimson Sister coming down, it's just like, oh, now what is she doing? You know? What has she done? Like, the usual suspects. It's Geller said in the previous session that keep your enemies closer, your friends close. The session really has proved that in his mind, sort of validated it with how Thistle has brought this person to where they didn't want them. And then I imagine in this next session we'll learn about what's going on with Raiden, and that's just going to further validate his inner thoughts.
That is understandable, because it definitely did not look good to have Thistle there with that Red Sister, and then almost immediately bring that Red Sister toward the Applebrook house. That was definitely not a good look for Thistle. And then I will shift over to Arve, when we last had left, she was following after Varellis, because Varellis was going around the town trying to pick up like contracts for work, trying to help people out as he goes. And the Arve had spoken to, she had received a note for, I believe it was for a special type of plant. Was that right, Arve?
Yes, it was some kind of swamp lily or something. I don't have my notes in front of me. And it was supposed to be able to help return her back to being full elf.
Yeah, so she had just gotten that, and she was trying to go after Varellus, and then she encounters this lady, this little auntie. Varellus is offering to help her with her groceries, and obviously Arve, being the sweet lady she is, offers to help as well. Not knowing that this sweet little lady, sweet little auntie is Bremia's auntie, and is going to be taking all these groceries up to the Applebrook house. And as they're doing that, Thistle's up there walking with this red sister toward that house. What is Arve thinking as she sees Thistle with this sister in red?
She was groaning inwardly, going, "Oh no, now what?" Not necessarily thinking that Thistle was up to no good, but she was just knowing Thistle probably better than most of the others. She was like, "Oh boy, what have we gotten into now?" But she wasn't sure exactly where they were going either. You know, they could have branched off and gone somewhere else other than the Applebrook farm. So it wasn't until they actually got there that that RFA was concerned, but at the same time, she's a lot more naive when it comes to the sisters than the people that grew up on this this continent, because she grew up mostly on the Elven continent, so she wasn't sure what to think when it all got down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That kind of leads us on as they get into the house. And Thistle's in there with Bremia, and I'll speak for Thistle. Thistle's mind from the beginning, when the sister started talking to her, was kind of like, okay, I need this lady to leave me alone. And when she hears, her interest in basically her and her friends, she's thinking, okay, I need to get this lady like off of the scent of me and my friends. And so, she tries to divert her, tries to get her to go, elsewhere, tries to get her to go to Miss Liza Thornfoot, who she knows would just be wacky, and probably that would be enough alone. But the sister's smart enough not to do that. And so lastly, she, sees the Applebrook house and knows that the sister wants to go there. So I was lucky to get a very successful crit so that Thistle could get her familiar to go warn Bremia that someone was coming, which they had talked earlier about a warning if something bad happened. So she had did that. So in Thistle's head, she was doing everything she can to keep everyone safe. She was going to send her familiar to warn Bremia and in turn Geller, because they were together last that Thistle knew. And then obviously Arve and Varellus were nowhere to be seen, so she thought they were safe. But as soon as she starts walking up, and then she gets the hollering from Arve, and then she gets the house, and there's Bremia, all those thoughts of protecting her friends kind of fall apart. She tries to play to an extent play. She was still annoyed with Bremia about the Applebrook stuff, but to play the part of, I don't know this lady, and the Applebrooks are no good and all this. So she continued to play that until the auntie came, and then when the auntie came, there was some real feelings of no goodness that she couldn't let stay inside, but she also still wanted to ensure everyone she cared about was safe. So she, played the game, and Bremia, to her own extent, also played that game because she also, I think, understood, okay, the sister could put me and, her friend Geller all in danger. So she was trying to de-escalate, and Thistle was trying to distract. And then RV, because because as you said, she isn't as knowledgeable or known about the sisterhood, kind of took a different approach. Can you explain her approach with how she dealt with the sister?
Well, she knew enough to keep her mouth shut about Geller. She had heard enough about that, but she didn't understand why telling the sister about the expired sister that they had encountered two campaigns previously, why that was such a big deal. And so while the others played off that they hadn't seen this silver sister, Arve was like, well, yeah, I saw her. We saw her and almost got caught with the we, but she mentioned her familiar, or her pet, actually, her lynx snow tiger cross. So she was able to use that. But yeah, she was trying to be honest and thinking, oh, well, she'll just go with me and we'll be able to take care of this. And there was no further feelings towards that sister because she knew that she barely used magic. So she didn't see the problem with it until Geller was kind enough to point out the fact that she needed to have a certain amulet or artifact with her in order to be able to come back out of the catacombs.
Yeah, that was quite the experience for sure. All of that, the sister, Arve makes that decision to be honest with the sister, and in turn, the sister does seem to let the others, in the group kind of go about their way, because now she's got Arve who's given her the information that she was looking for, and so, which all seems great. I think Arve, and I think even maybe to extent, Thistle and the others are thinking, okay, for that moment, okay, we helped her out. Arve helped her out. Now, we don't have to necessarily stick with this lady. We can bolt at the moment she's out the door. But the sister had other plans. She kind of, I think, could sense that maybe she wanted to ensure that, okay, you tell me where my sister is. I want to ensure that you do come with me. And then she did something to you, Arve. Nahele, what exactly did that red sister do to Arve? If you could expand on what's now tied Arve and the sister together.
Can't say much, but there are threads that were woven into Arve's flesh through a simple handshake that also wove their way into the sister's forearm as well, binding them together. It's pretty much all I could say other than what Geller discovered through his interactions with that NPC.
Yeah, and what did Geller discover? What did Geller discover about this potential tie or bond between Arve and the sister?
I believe he called it something like an oath sworn binding, and it was essentially a binding spell that ties the lives usually of the two individuals making the contract together, so that if harm comes to one or the other, they're both affected. And additionally, the person making the contract, or leading the contract rather, usually tries to sort of lean fate better in their favor with it in some ways. What ways those were unclear. But Galler's intentions are to sort of figure out what's the mechanics behind this spell and how he can use it to our benefit here in the next session with his plans.
Yep. So that was a lot of the session. I think toward the end, Geller had snuck out after all of that to find out more information from his contact. And while that was happening, we also had all this is happening, and we had a certain knight in shining armor that was on his own little side mission. Raps isn't here to really expand on that, but just to give a little bit of oversight, and Nahele might need to give some overview on this because I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like Raps's character was going to try to rendezvous with his, I believe his lord, which is in a lot of ways kind of like a father figure for his character. This was the lord that Thistle had been able to see through her like familiar's eyes, that had been with the other character. Oh my god, what was her name? Valen. When Valen had went to the house Dravone, and the sisters were there with her, and the last vision or sight that Thistle was able to show was that Valen was there, I believe, with the sisters, but also the lord of the house, which again is like Raps' father figure, was also in a carriage with them. And so he went to rendezvous with them. He did. And let's just say he may or may not, based on that interaction, be betraying the group at some point in the future. So that all was going on while we were trying to evade this sister. We've got one of our very own knights in shining armor going through and potentially, selling us out. So that will be a fun little tidbit as we return Daggerheart next week. So how does the group that we have here, how do we feel about perhaps Raps' character, turning us into the sisters anyway?
Death.
Did you say what?
Death.
Oh my gosh. I can say that I can say that Thistle would not be very happy. She would not be happy with her Prince Charming if she knew what he was up to. I think from an out of character perspective, I completely understand. But from a character perspective, not a great look. Not a great look for him. So that will be fun to visit as well. Were there any other parts of our last session that you all wanted to touch on or had any questions or comments?
No, but to elaborate a little further on that is Geller has done too much to turn himself in, and any good outcome come of it. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have for sure. I don't think he'll turn on Raiden unless he absolutely has to, but we'll see how it goes.
That, I'll turn the mic back over to Nahele.
Yeah, just to clarify little things too. So the father figure for Raiden, his name is Lord Garen Dravone. He's also known as the Lion General. They have a kinship of father and sonhood, even though they're not blood. And the scene was unique because it wasn't the general's intent to necessarily get Raiden into further trouble, but to get him out of trouble, because of what the group done or not done in the city of Valmir. So there's a lot there. Raiden was about to actually turn his back on this father figure, but at the last moment turned around and said he would do it. Whether he follows through or not will be determined in our next session, but there was a moment where he thought of the group, and then there was the turnaround moment where he was like, but this man has never done me wrong. There's a little conflict. I feel like I just had to clarify there was a big conflict of thought going on there in character, which I thought was well role played, because a lot of people would have been like, oh sure, I'll just lie to this guy and protect my friends. But for Raiden, I feel like the way he did it leaves everybody at the table wondering if he'll just protect his friends or protect the man that literally has more or less been his father. I feel like that's a huge cliffhanger for sure, because I feel like that is a topic that none of you know really about yet. And when you do, I feel like now you have the sister to deal with, and then you have however Raiden decides to promote this to you. I feel like that's going to be a huge talking point next session.
We have 4 things that are working against us right now.
Yeah.
And it's just chaos. We were really gonna have to dig ourselves out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes that's what happens when you're not going through a script, right? Where the players make the decisions on things, and sometimes it's in good intentions that ends up getting the group into further trouble.
Where did you think we were gonna go after this?
Honestly, I had already planned for the missions, so I was like, all right, they'll probably have a quick scene. They'll probably all lie to the sister, because no one trusts the sisters, whether that's the intention or not. That's just how it worked. And I was like, all right, well, that's probably going to be quick. People are going to make that scene quick. And you guys were already following. Thistle and Bremir were following that to a T. I was like, okay, they're going the way I thought. And then Tony's character, Arve, did something I did not expect, was pure honesty. And I was like, okay, well, this sister's not going to just take her word for it, so she's going to ask her to be led back to where she found him. So I did not expect you guys to go backwards. I definitely did not expect that. I also didn't expect Raiden to actually turn around and then side with his father, at least his pseudo father, in that moment. Whether he sticks to that or not, that'll be determined, but I did not expect that either. Those are 2 moments I definitely did not expect, because I thought Raiden would be like, oh, I'll just go back. I'll let him think I'm going to help them, but I'm going to protect my friends. But he's left me kind of in the dark, which is good, because I don't know where he's going to lead you guys. And I would say Arve's choice is not a bad choice. I think those moments really make it fun for all of you, too, when you have a little like, yep, that wasn't planned, but that's how it's going. As you said, you have 4 issues to contend with now, and that's because of the roleplay that happened on Sunday.
Yeah.
At least we can still surprise you.
I don't even know if the
The
others.
fun part I'm just gonna say is that the episode was literally, I think, called Brenderbrook and the Quag or something like that, and we never even got to the Quag. So
I do this all the time with my outline notes for like sessions that I make before they happen. I'll title it something, and then like they'll not even get into like the room for that thing, and I'm like, now I gotta change the name.
Yeah, I have to go back and change the stream's name. Because I had it planned. I was like, oh yeah, that's what'll happen. Nope. And I don't like following a script. So obviously, if players decide not to follow my notes, and that's 100% okay. Still wasn't unexpected. I definitely thought more deception was going to be at play for sure. And it wasn't, which is good, because now you all have this tension moment, even probably a little bit with RFA. Because, my question for everybody, and no one has to answer this, but I actually am wondering what characters are thinking about RFA in the moment. Like, what's going on in their heads? Like, this just got put into a very hard situation. I feel like that's a fair question to ask.
I'll let Geller say first.
So, at first, Geller was a little angry, but he kept that under wraps. Because he does feel like RFA perhaps is just a little naive. But he also feels kind of sympathetic towards her, because like he in that moment he asked her if she felt like she wanted to die, and for a minute Geller sort of went into that mindset and was like, he understood if that's what her mind was at that moment. But I think getting a further insight into RV's thought process and her personality allowed him to better understand why she did what she did.
Yeah, I think in that moment, I think Thistle was not angry. I don't think she's angry with RV at all. I think she was worried for her friend. She was definitely very worried initially, because she's just like a little frustrated, a little worried, when RV told the truth. And then I feel like she still feels that frustration and worry. But I think where they left things after, Thistle kind of had her little talk with Arve, because, she was trying to, basically Arve was trying to say, I'll give up my life for you all, because that's what we can do. And I think Thistle, and I don't think Arve meant this, but I think Thistle really got her feelings hurt pretty bad, only because that it came in a way where it kind of felt like, Arve is her closest friend, other than, her little animal friends. And I think Thistle didn't feel necessarily that Arve understood, like, their friendship or how much she cared. And also, some of the stuff with the mushroom stuff, and kind of RV kind of communicating like I've been stuck like this mushroom for so long, and it's like a pain to her in a way. And I think Thistle maybe had taken those things for granted a little bit. So it's not just all RV, but I think she'd taken those things for granted, and that it really bothered RV. And so I think for her, there's going to be some interesting dynamics going forward. I guess that's what I'll say. Because I feel like the relationship now might be shifting in a way that I, as the out of character, didn't expect, but it might change their relationship going forward. Yeah, so it's gonna be really interesting and fun RPs for sure.
And Arve, what's your thoughts? We'll kind of wrap it up with your thoughts on that for our discussion today. But what was Arve thinking when Thistle and Bremia were deceiving this lady? Like, what ultimately what made you decide, okay, my character would do this in this moment? Kind of give you a means to kind of like tell us what was going on in Arve's head.
Oh, partially nothing was going through her head. But she didn't understand on something so innocent, or to her it seemed innocent. And she wasn't.
No thoughts.
What?
Head empty, no thoughts.
No ill thoughts. Anyway, she didn't trust the sister, but at the same time, she didn't see what the harm was in letting her know that, hey, look, you know, your the sister is dead. Then later on, she lives to regret that because now she's bound to that sister. But she didn't think ill of the other two. She just, I don't know. She just did what she felt needed to be done. And she was also trying to like divert that sister from the other two. What little she could do.
Yes, just real quick. When they were bringing up the object to you, out of character and in character, was there a moment where your character was like, oh shoot? Or was she still kind of like, no, I mean, if she had the opportunity to give this thing to her, right, in good faith, with helping her as well, what do you think, RV? Where are you leaning, I guess? You don't have to tell us the answer, but where are you kind of leaning in all of these thoughts?
I'm leaning at rolling the dice and letting the dice make the decision what she does if it comes to that. But I think she's going to try to not give the device to the sister. But if push comes to shove and it's to protect the others, she will sacrifice herself. I mean, it's not a position I purposely put RV in. I just stupidly stepped into it. But I don't know. I will not know until the role play happens and she does what she does.
Character question: did you forget about the item and the one-way entrance of the cave?
Yes. I looked at my notes and I even had it written down that we had it. But at the moment, I was so steeped in Arave. And then she was trying to, I stepped in it, so let me fix it or let me do what I need to do. And, emotions got in there too, real time and character-wise. So, yeah, it was a oh shoot moment, but it is what it is, and it will be interesting.
I had to ask that because the moment Geller told you about the device again, I was like, oh, at least someone was selling her like it's a one-way trip.
This is why I was screaming when she was talking about it in the room, because I wasn't there. I couldn't say anything.
I'm sorry.
My mouth dropped open when you said that because I was like, I wonder what's going on in Tony's head right now. Oh my god.
And then I felt bad because it dawned on me what RV was saying and how Thistle would possibly take it. And it was like, I don't know, I just messed that whole thing up big time. Now to live with the repercussions.
I wish we could get more insight on what Varellis was thinking during that conversation, because I am interested on what he was trying to get at the beginning there. But I think he might have just not understood what we were saying to Arve.
Yeah, that would be good to kind of get a glimpse in that. Sometimes I think the characters that don't necessarily say a lot have a lot to think of. I feel like there's a lot more thought behind their quietness.
I don't blame him though. I know he got frustrated with me because I had already, not accidentally, but accidentally sacrificed a different character in a different campaign. And then it looked like I'm sacrificing Arave, so I kind of get where he came through with that. It's like, we gotta not be doing this. It's like, sorry. I stepped in it with both feet.
I do think, though, that those discussions do need to be had perhaps after the game or in private rather than during the game and on stream, but
Yeah, because it's hard for me.
Yeah, I agree. Those are valid conversations to have. It's just, better to have those after, on a break or after and also we don't know, the decisions or how characters make their decisions. And so sometimes, I've had this just in general with roleplay. Like I'll have a question like, "Hey, this happened. I don't understand it. Is it possible you provide some insight? Because I just want to, I like to dig into like a character's thoughts and feelings at times. And so sometimes it's like, whoa, I didn't expect that to come from. And then you learn a little bit more. So, and sometimes you're not going to get that information, but sometimes there's no harm in at least asking. And if they're like, oh, that's not really something I can say, or, like Nahele likes to say, well, I can't give you any information.
Well, you're supposed to write notes.
Oh, hush it, buddy.
I try to make
yeah,
good notes,
so
but
fun times.
I don't know what it is about. I guess I try to do it in the sheet, and the way that notes work in the sheet's kind of weird. So perhaps I need to start doing it like on a Google document or something, because I don't get always super detailed notes. I get kind of the gist of what was said, and then I miss some details. But yeah, I might have to look into it.
Yeah, because I mean, if you guys don't write something down, I'm not going to not give you it, but I might have you roll to see if you can recall the information, because I feel like that's fair, because it's like, all right, well, you engaged this person like multiple times, so...
Like in my game, like if they forget something out of character, I let them roll to remember it in character.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because even in real life, we're like, what was that person's name? And then someone reminds you of something like, oh, that's right. That's that guy's name. Oh, okay. I feel like that's what the role signifies, is like the proverbial brain fart. It's like, oh, I don't quite remember, but I'm going to roll. Okay, you roll. No, I think, obviously, I agree that certain conversations definitely should happen off stream and during breaks or afterwards. I do think those conversations are important. And if you need to kind of like jot down a note for yourself, maybe use like a Discord or a sheet of paper or something, like, okay, I gotta remind myself to ask so-and-so this question because I'm not quite sure why they make that decision. And then they can explain like, yeah, I made the decision purely on out of character, just gonna be honest with you, or I made a decision based on what my character would do, and I'm gonna just live with the consequences. Like, sometimes it's that simple. And then sometimes it's like, yeah, I completely forgot about the object that only allows me to enter and leave. If I don't have that object, I'm screwed. I totally forgot about that object. Like, it could be like that, something as simple as that too, where sometimes I feel like as players we forget, oh, that story detail, yeah, that would have been important if I remembered that. I might have made that decision completely differently.
I think it's fun sometimes when you have those little lapse in memory, because they can just also be how people are actually in the world. Like, maybe she didn't remember that, but maybe her character just didn't remember that for real. Like, sometimes there's just details that miss people, and sometimes that can make for a funny moment. Like how I accidentally revealed that I use magic to Bremia's aunt.
Oh my god, you created such a scene between Bremian and her aunt because of that. I was like, oh no, here we go, because she's like, doesn't view the sisters in a negative light, and she's got this man who just admitted using magic in her house. I'm like, oh boy.
Right, I didn't think about that out of character, and I just kind of rolled with it in character.
Yeah, because a lot of people probably, as many people view the sisters as like a negative force in the world, there's probably just as many people that view them as a positive force, right? You kind of have to introduce a little bit more of the positive reinforcement of the sisters, because you guys have pretty much only faced like the critiques of them, like, and finally meeting a sister face to face in discussion last session, because I think that was the first time you actually talked to a sister. I feel like that left people guarded for sure. And she genuinely was literally just trying to find her fellow sister, but the implications of how to go about doing that is where the problem is created. Because once the device is shown, like you guys talked about, I feel like that certainly is going to create some tension. How it's going to create it, we don't know yet, but I feel like that is certainly where the issue probably stems from, is that device. Probably not necessarily finding the sister, but more so how you guys got out of there. So that will be interesting. And whether or not she believes Tony had nothing to do with the sister's death or not, right? There's a lot of what ifs in this situation.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You also implied that there's a level of emotion or thought reading going on between the binding too, which I'm no idea how that's gonna go.
It's like a
That
subconscious
makes it
thing.
even. Whoops.
Well, no. So what's going to happen gameplay wise is, and I kind of gave Tony like a little heads up, that any lies that she makes is going to be seen as a lie. There will not be any rolls because it's subconscious. So she has a big disadvantage in that situation.
Fortunately, so far she hasn't lied.
No. Yeah, that's why Geller's associate's like, yeah, you might want to like steer her away from your plan a little bit, even though you stick to your plan. You might, I don't know, you might want to trick her so she doesn't make a mistake.
At least we know she tells the truth.
Yeah, she does. I think she's a young elf too, so maybe a little bit where the naivety comes from.
Though she might have to
Yeah.
get a little creative when if she starts asking more about how she found the body.
She might just tell the truth too. I don't know. Like I said, I will not know until she
I
till
would
she's
say
put on the spot. I
unless-
think about it a little bit, but I don't dwell on it.
I would say like unless the idea of like the Eye of Argonis coming up happens, I'd probably just be like, tell her the truth that we found her and everything, and sort of lie through omission kind of thing.
Yeah, that's sort of what she's been doing at this point, because when she said we, it's like her and her cat. She didn't say everybody else.
I think that was before the binding, huh?
Yeah. Well, even if it had been, she didn't lie. She didn't say nobody else. She said we. Oh yeah, we is me and my cat.
That would have been the lie though, right there. The you and the cat.
If these were just me and my cat. But if you're just like me and my cat, then it wouldn't have been a lie.
It would have been
Right.
deception though, wouldn't it?
Being deceptive, sure.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Maybe, maybe
being
not.
deceptive at all?
Well, it'd be a roll. She'd have to roll for deception for sure. Outright lies, no, but deception, she'd still have to roll for that too. Just like anyone would in any situation. You still have to roll to try to deceive someone who's cunning, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we think we're, even if you're trying to steer someone off from the truth, right, that you're still being deceptive. Regardless of how well worded you are, it might just give you an advantage in the role, but you're still trying to be deceptive with your information. You're trying to deceive somebody.
Of course. But there's a differentiation for sure.
For sure. And that's why sometimes you get an advantage in those roles. And then sometimes there won't be a role if you completely negate, like utterly negate, like, or circumvent the question. Like if you could circumvent the question, that's even better, because then there's no interpretation of deception. And I think that's sometimes where we all fall into. Is like, well, I don't think that is a deception, but I do. Or I don't think that's a deception, but you think it is. So it's, I feel like if you can circumvent, that's probably the best solution. In situations, for sure. Because then you don't there's no chance of interpretation of deception, right? I always felt like deception rolls were always like the hardest ones to determine, because you know the players are trying to be clever and you want to reward their cleverness, but you also have to try to like step back and determine if it would be perceived as a deception roll or a persuasion or a charm. Like, right, you kind of have to like play it by ear sometimes, and sometimes what one person is taking it as is maybe not as it's intended. And I think that's always the hard part with those kind of rolls. It's tough. Kind of like performance rolls too. Like you do a performance roll because you're trying to act something out. Those are a little bit more clear cut in a lot of situations than deception. I just feel like deception is the hardest one to determine intent of the player's action, or maybe the game master's intention.
Perhaps.
Because someone could have done insight checks on this lady too, but no one did, right? But if someone did, I'd be like, all right, then take the roll and then explain.
I think for me, probably like the result of an insight check would be harder.
Yeah, I just think those two rolls are the hardest ones out of all the skills in any system. I feel like those are always the hardest, because sometimes players and game masters always have like, oh, I'm going to be very clever with how I word this. But if a player rolls insight, then obviously they feel like I'm being deceptive. It's just kind of like when I ask for a deception roll, I just feel like you're being deceptive. It's not the intent of what you're trying to do, but maybe it's how I'm taking it. It's kind of like vice versa with the insight rolls.
Right.
So tough. Speaking of those rolls, I actually learned recently. See, I learned too. I learned in 5th edition, apparently criticals do not apply to skill checks.
They do not, but most people homebrew that they do anyway.
Yeah, I normally would too, but it's nice to know, because it's like, man, if you have like a boss and you really don't want the plot to be spoiled, you're like, sure, you can roll, but you're gonna have to hit a very high DC, and they get a 20. Ugh, I could see why that doesn't exist.
Get wrong is like, there's no actual like surprise round. There's like it's technically like a surprised condition.
That makes sense to me too. I mean, a lot of people homebrew that too, though, right? That's why homebrews are awesome, because you kind of flex the rules to your party. But I'm getting off course. I'm sorry. Anyways, I appreciate you, Tony, kind of explaining our base thought process in that, since we got Geller and Thistle's kind of perspective on it. I would love to know what Bremia was thinking. I really would love to know what Bremia was thinking when you were being truthful, when Bremia was so carefully trying to be not so truthful. And I would love to see what Varellis was thinking, because I agree with Geller. I feel like he's one of the quieter characters, so it would be cool to kind of get insight on that. But and Raiden wasn't there, so Raiden has no idea that you just kind of threw the group into that situation, and then Raiden has another situation to introduce to you guys.
Find out in the morning.
I know, that's gonna be so fun. Anyways,
What a mess.
yes. But thank you guys for coming today. I appreciate it. I know we spent a little more time on the MMORPG than I intended to. Nostalgia kicks in when we talk about that stuff. So that's me. That's a me thing. That's a rambling me thing. But I do appreciate you guys coming, talking about Daggerheart 2 towards the end here. And I look forward to playing it again with you, Eslaine, next weekend. And we may or may not have our Mass Effect session tomorrow. It really depends on Tony here, on her personal stuff going on. So
I think we probably will be fine.
just let me know ahead.
Remember,
Of course.
RP stands for Rambling Players, so you're fine.
Then I must be really good at RPing.
You are.
I am like Thistle in real life. I just ramble. Awesome.
We
Well,
don't
then,
take thistle slander.
I endorse Thistle slander.
so does Bremia's aunt. Just saying. Call her house
That
a
no
whore
good
house.
lady.
Can't believe you called her house a whore house. Like, what?
I don't know. Where
So
was the
funny.
lie? Where was the lie? The
Oh,
one who's got men everywhere.
wait. The only man
I
she
think
had in the
Bremia-
house was Geller, though.
Yep, her gentleman caller.
Oh my god.
Bremia not Bremia, but Thistle jumping up on the table. All I could think of is her crouching. You know, she's so short to start with as a halfling, crouching down with her knees bent and her little fists up, gritting her teeth, ready to get into a big old scrap.
Sorry, Geller was like 2 seconds, I guess, away from being Bremia's uncle. Then I guess.
I was like, yeah, maybe I should have just rizzed her up, you know?
You would no longer be her mentor. You'd be her aunt, uncle, step uncle.
I'm sure she'll love that.
Awesome. All right. Well, then I will see you next weekend, Eslane, and I will see you tomorrow, Cersei and Tony. Thank you.
See you then.